In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Well, good evening, viewers, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am so excited about tonight's adventure, tonight's journey. We are going to be talking about keys to a joyful, lasting marriage. We cannot expect the honeymoon phase to last forever. It's cute, but it doesn't last. But we can follow some Bible-based advice to ensure that our marriages are happy and last for a lifetime. So tonight's panel, I'm joined by Dana and Colleen. We are going to draw from our Bible knowledge as well as our experience and observations, both of our own marriages and of those around us, to offer suggestions to married Christian women. So Dana, Colleen, I'm so excited to be with y'all again this evening. Dana, I hear you're traveling soon. How are things looking in preparations for coming to the motherland of Texas?
The motherland. Well, it is my mother's motherland. You know, she was born and raised. She's a Texan. So does that make me a Texan by proxy?
Close enough. We'll count it.
Yeah. So yeah, I've got just down the hall, everything ready to jump into the suitcase. Lots of fun. We're very excited.
We're excited to see you.
Oh, I'm really excited to see you too.
Colleen, how about you? How are things going where you are?
Everything's going great. I've got a Bible study with a couple that we get on the phone with them and we study the Bible together. My husband and I do, and we're in Ruth right now. A great story about devotion and being loyal to each other. So maybe I've got some background from that study that I can bring into tonight's study.
Beautiful. I love that idea of studying the Bible over the phone. That is something I'm the generation that doesn't talk on the phone. So that is something that is unfamiliar to me, but I like that. I might have to try that sometime. Well, let's start off, and y'all are not prepared for this question, but that's okay. Let's talk a little bit about our marriages. I want y'all to tell me how long you've been married, what that's looked like, moves, how many kids you have, things like that. Colleen, why don't you start us off?
Okay, let me give my disclaimer first on this whole lesson. I am not a professional counselor in any way. Also, I can speak only from scripture and my own experience and anecdotes from other people, things that I have heard. So for people listening, please think about what we're saying, what I'm saying. And of course, you know, you've got a different husband from what I have. So who knows if it'll work in your marriage, but you can at least give it some thought. That's my disclaimer. I have been married since 1987. We've got 3 grown children that are Christians, and they're married to Christians, and they're starting to have babies now. My marriage has been great. I'm married to a non-confrontational type, not a big ego, and a faithful man who loves to laugh. We love to laugh. I would recommend that for anybody. And is that anything else you want to know? Anything else that Beautiful. I can fill you in on?
Beautiful. Perfect. Dana, what about you? I know you and David have been married for a minute longer than I was, but
just a minute. Yeah. Last week we celebrated our 46th wedding anniversary. So we're pushing the numbers up there. And it's been a joyride. It really has. David is Italian, so everything that comes with that and all of the passion and fun. And it's just, you just have to understand when you marry somebody, as long as you are both in love with the Lord. And that's what made me fall in love with David, was how much he loved the Lord. He loved him with lots of passion. And we have two grown children, and 5 grandchildren that are from 10 to 19, and 4 of the 5 have been baptized. And that's the real joy of my life, or my grandchildren, and seeing them starting their life with the Lord. So yeah,
Beautiful.
It's a wonderful ride.
Yep. Well, I was, for our listeners who aren't maybe familiar with my story, I feel like a lot of people are at this point. But Matt and I were married for just shy of 20 years. We almost made it before he passed away from ALS, coming up on 2 years ago. And we have 2 teenagers. So I'm still in that kind of phase of life. But he also was a preacher the whole time that we were married. And so part of that lot in life is also doing marriage counseling. So I wasn't married for as long, but I've seen kind of a lot of marriages. But Colleen, you hit on something good that I wanted to say at some point during our time together this evening. And that is that the idea of husband is not monolithic. There is not some capital H husband that always reacts the same way and thinks the same way and does the same thing. And your husband is very different from my husband, and my husband is very different from the next girl's husband. And so all of the things that we say tonight, God's truth is truth, obviously. And the way that he tells us to treat one another is always right. But the way that looks in each individual marriage is going to be very different. And the way that looked in your parents' marriage is not going to be the way it looks in your marriage necessarily. And the way it looks in your marriage is not going to be the way it looks in your kids' marriage necessarily. So with that, I want to kind of pick up in the middle of what we all prepared for tonight. I want to know what y'all have to suggest before marriage even begins. What would you tell younger women who are considering marriage, but also women in those early days who still kind of have time to pick back up? What do we need to consider at the outset? What are important things to have a joyful, lasting marriage from the beginning? Dana, why don't you lead us off?
Well, my guideline, and my parents had a wonderful marriage. They were married 70 years. And my dad was a preacher, and I saw all of the marriage counseling they did over the years too. But they always taught me first, you look for someone who has a heart for God. And I think that is, in its most simplistic form, what we all should be looking for. And then you look for how it manifests in their life. And the minute that I knew that I wanted to marry my husband was that this was back in the day when you were in college and you took notes with a cassette tape player. Maybe some of our listeners don't even know what that is, but it's this little box that you set on your desk, and you would push it and you would tape the professor. And that's how we were so clever at that time. You don't have to take notes, just bring your cassette tape. Now that cassette was like a couple of $100, but anyway, David had one, and then I noticed that it was gone one day. And I said, "Did your tape player break?" And he went, "No." And he just kind of dismissed it. And I just pushed and pushed and pushed. And I said, "Well, what happened? Did somebody steal it?" And he said, "No, there's this lady lives above me in the apartment who's blind. And I got her some books on tape, and she didn't have a cassette player. So I gave it to her." And I went, "Done." Done. That's he had gotten her the Bible on tape. And he wasn't bragging to me about it, and he wasn't showing off. I had to pull it out of him, and I went, "Yeah, this is the heart I want." And that has continued to be for 46 years.
I love that. And knowing David, I love getting to see that side of him too. It's fun to hear those stories. Mm-hmm. Colleen, what about you? What advice would you give to younger women who are just starting out?
Well, the first thing is you are a team. Sometimes people, they go around that, and then they go straight to, here's your role and here's his role, and this is what he's supposed to do. But wait. You're a team, and right. Teams work together. Yeah. And when somebody's injured, you fill in for their spot, and you just make it work. You got a lot of time together. You got a lot of things to accomplish. So you're a team. You need to act like a team first. I love this. I don't know if Isla can get this up, but Proverbs 27:17. This is a beautiful verse that I think is appropriate for marriage. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. So one man sharpens another. And that's what, hopefully, that's what you're looking for, somebody to sharpen you, not let you just get flabby, but sharpen you, make you better, help you get to heaven. So that's my scripture for that. I tell people, this is just practical stuff. I say you need to date at least 2 years. I know a lot of people don't do that. Whoa. But I say, I don't know. What do either say yes or yay or nay on that? Do you? Mm-mm. What do you agree with that?
I don't know that I've ever thought about having a specific time that I suggest to people. That's interesting.
I think it depends on their age when they're dating too. Certainly if they're 16, you don't want to walk into that. But I think that the older you are, and to say 2 years, that's hard to remain pure.
It is. However, you have to learn how to control your sexual appetite even when you are married. And I know that because there are so many warnings against adultery and fornication in the Bible. I know that's always a temptation, even if you're married. So I think that people should, they need to learn to stay pure and not just get married so that they can be pure. But just hear me out. I do get that. I know that's what a lot of people say, and that's fine. That's fine. I see what they're saying. I say anybody can be good for a year, even if they have some problem, maybe a mental problem, or maybe they can't hold down a job, or she gets, gets angry and just it comes unglued. You can hold that down maybe for a year, but I say you can't do it for 2 years. So that's what I always told my kids. You want to really know him. So we're talking to women here, but if this could be applied to men as well. You want to really know him, but just as important is that you want him to see you over a long period of time. It's not just me being, shrewd and knowing how he is. It's like you really want him to know what you look like when you haven't done your hair and you don't have any makeup on, which he's going to see you a lot. Or when you're cranky, or how you act when you haven't had any food, things like that. So you want him to know you, and be willing to see his warts. Be willing to. So I think so often people they're so enamored of this person. They just aren't willing to look and be practical. You have to be practical. Bring up any warts you see. And if he refuses to change, decide if they're deal breakers or just things that you don't like, but you can live with, but at least see them. And instead of brushing them aside. So that's in a nutshell. I think that's maybe what I would advise. That's what I told my kids.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And I think kind of the thread through all of that is you have to be willing to be honest, both in your portrayal of yourself to your significant other, but also in your assessment of who they are. And I think that's the benefit to a longer relationship, is the more situations that you see them in, the more likely you are to see who they really are underneath. We're real good at masks. We're real good at hiding who we are. But in marriage, that mask has got to drop at some point. And it will, whether you want it to or not, at some point. But that brings up an interesting topic that I want to spend a few minutes on. I was listening to a podcast the other day that said that the average marriage that is going to end in divorce does so within 7 years. We've all heard the statistic that 50% of marriages end in divorce, 50% of first marriages. That number gets higher for second, third, fourth. But that most of those marriages on average are going to end within the first 7 years. But most of the problems start by year 2 or 3, and they don't seek help until year 6 on average. So you've got couples that have marriage problems, that have difficulties in their marriage, and they try and stick it out, and they try and stick it out, and they finally seek help. But at that point, it's been going on so long that a lot of times there's no turning back. And so I want to spend a few minutes looking at what we do when marriage is difficult, because it's not.
Lauren,
yeah, go ahead.
When you say, and I want to know in these questions, I was asking, are we talking about serious stuff? Or is it like annoying things? As we go into this, what are you thinking of here?
I think both, because I think even just mild annoying stuff can turn into serious stuff if it's not dealt with appropriately. And let me say again, I am not your counselor. Any of you who are listening, I am not your marriage counselor. I do have a little bit of a mental health background, but I always talk to your elders, find a counselor, listen to, but there are going to be problems that are deal breakers, right? There are going to be problems that have to change. And some of those, we all know that the exception to the no divorce rule in the Bible is infidelity. And if one of you is committing infidelity, then that can be a marriage killer. But there are other problems that happen in marriage that are serious, right? Especially as a preacher's wife dealing with marriage counseling, there are Christians who do not act like Christians in their marriage. There are people who are a part of the Lord's body who do not act like it behind closed doors, whether that's physical abuse, whether that's emotional manipulation and narcissistic behavior. There are all kinds of really serious problems. And I don't know that we're all equipped to take those on in this podcast tonight. And maybe that's another topic for another day. But I think when we talk about disagreements, right, there are a lot of times in marriage where you're coming at it from two completely different perspectives, whatever it is. Whether it's anything from how to deal with the kids to what time dinner should be to anything in between. You're coming at things from two different perspectives. And the question is, what do you do and how do you make that decision when those perspectives knock heads, right? When we've got two people who see the world in different ways and have to come to one agreement and one path of behavior, one path of action. What do you do with that? So how can we negotiate that sort of thing? What do we do when we come to the table with a great idea and a wonderful way of doing it, and he just will not listen? Dana, what do you do? How do you make David listen?
Well, nobody makes David do nothing. Nobody makes Dana do nothing. I am so out of my league here, girls. I am not a psychiatrist, psychologist, anything. I just will tell you what's happened in my marriage. But yeah, we have owned many businesses together, and marriage is a business. And so we kind of come at not in a disagreement on an approach to something, to where one or the other just goes, okay, I think your approach is probably better. I mean, it's never been a deal breaker. It's never been it, but it's come from always from God and from how would God want us to handle this. And always with a lot of prayer before we step forward with something. So that's what has been wonderful. And I think a lot of times the marital problems that I've seen is because they don't go back to Genesis 2:24. You got to leave and cleave, girls and men. And they want to bring mom and dad into their relationship and into their marriage. And that was, that was never going to happen. It's the two of us and the two of us against the world, which is a great way to be. You don't want to leave a door open for anybody else to come into that two of you.
Right. And that goes back to that team concept that Colleen had mentioned, it's the two of us. It's not us and my parents. It's not us and your parents. It's us. And we've got to figure this out and decide what we're going to do together. Colleen, what have you seen? What do you suggest?
Yeah, with many of these questions, they're kind of negative skews on things that happen in marriage, and I think that's good. I think that's good for us to talk about these things. But I still go back to before you got married. I have known people. I've been close to people who let me in. People in my family who told me what happened in their marriage, in the little, the butting heads and things like that. Nothing really personal, but how it went down the drain, how that happened, and a lot of times people will say, when we were dating, he did this. I should have seen that coming. And that is one thing that, once you get into a marriage and then it turns sour, then you become a philosopher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a good idea. Try to be the philosopher beforehand. So what I have found with people in general, I've had a long career. I have played sports. I've taught kids Bible class for decades. I've raised 3 kids. So one is, make your case. If you've got this clever idea, and it depends on how important it is. It depends on that. All of these, it depends on exactly what it is. But often continuing to bring it up after you've already made your case will just make him dig in more. It becomes, then it's a fight. And even if if it dawns on him that your idea was great, he just can't do anything but dig in because you just kept bugging him about it. So, and he might become focused on winning instead of the fair thing and the best idea. So back off stating it again, unless he brings it up. Maybe he brings it up again himself. If it's something you can do on your own, like exercising or eating healthy or saving money, do it yourself. If there's no problem with doing that, you do it, and maybe he'll see, oh, that was a pretty good idea, and he'll forget all about the fight over it, and or he can ignore your ideas. So that some things you can just do it yourself.
Absolutely. And I think you hit on something important there. I was reminded of 2 Timothy chapter 2. And in verse 23, he says, but reject foolish and ignorant disputes because you know that they breed quarrels. He doesn't say reject all disputes, right? Some hills are worth dying on. And sometimes you've got to have the fight because it's worth. But sometimes we have the fight because it's fun. And sometimes we have the fight because we've decided to die on this hill. And not
it's fun, Lauren.
I mean, okay, in full disclosure, Matt and I were both high school debaters. I went on to be a college debater. Fighting was definitely a pastime in our family. We definitely, and even I used to say that holidays with Matt's family, discussion is a contact sport. Because that is definitely how his family rolls. And that's how I've always rolled too, which is part of why I like doing stuff like this too. But sometimes arguing is fun to a point until you get invested in it. And then it's a problem. And so in my own marriage, in my own life, I've seen times when I have decided to pick this battle and to stake this hill, and I'm going to die on this hill when it's something that's not important. It's not necessary to fight over. And I think part of it, back to what Dana said too, part of it is we're a team. We do this life together. And so I have to decide if this is worth blowing up, not the marriage itself, but the goodness of the marriage. Is this worth blowing up the friendship that we have within our marriage? Right. Just to be right, just to stick it to him. And there were definitely times in our lives when we would fuss about something and I would let it go and he would let it go. And a couple of days later, he'd come back and he'd say, I think we should do this thing that was exactly the thing we'd fought over. And it was my idea. And I would
What did you do? This is a later question. What did you do then?
I said, you know what, honey, that's a great idea. And we just observed the Passover about the whole fight. Because it's not about being right. Yep. It's not about winning the fight. And I think that is when I feel like, he just won't listen to me. Okay, is the important thing moving forward and accomplishing our goals as a family, or is the important thing him saying, Lauren, you were right? Which one of those is really my goal here? If it's the latter, then that's a heart problem. And I need to fix that. If my goal here is to, I was right, I won the fight, that's a problem. That's a pride problem. And I need to deal with that pride problem in my heart. Colleen, you look like you were agreeing there.
Yeah, or if it's like you want to go, yes, I told you this a year ago. You don't do it. Don't do it because you've got a smooth ending. Just leave it alone. You got what you thought was the best idea. Just leave it alone. I know it's really hard. Do that with your kids too. They'll come around 5 years later and go, guess what I did? And they'll tell you exactly what you told them 5 years ago that they turn their nose up at it. It just go, oh, that's an excellent idea. Just like you did, Lauren.
I will say, I do that with my kids too, that they will come and tell me something and I'll say, if only someone had told you not to do that thing. And look, here you are now suffering the consequences of having done that thing. So now this is turning into my therapy session. Y'all are learning a lot more about my heart problems and the way I get relationships wrong.
Can I throw in a quote?
Because
please. You said this. Do the two of you, I hope people in the audience maybe remember a guy named Deepak Chopra?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, he was on Oprah a lot.
Yeah. So he was really big in the 80s, 90s, but he's still around. And I heard a recent interview with him. He's been married for a long, long, long time. And someone asked him the secret to a long marriage. And he said, get over being right. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I have decided, it depends on what it is. But if I say, boy, it's sunny out and it looks great and this is going to be a pretty day, and he says, well, it's going to rain, just go on. Just go on. It doesn't matter unless, you were planning a picnic or something.
It doesn't matter.
But just let that stuff go. I think he's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we read 1 Corinthians 13 at weddings.
Yep. Just took it right out of my mouth.
Well, then go ahead. Go ahead with what you were going to
go
there.
I was just going to say, you just refer back to 1 Corinthians 13 on any issue. I mean, any issue, and it answers it. But I think verse 4, love suffers long. We've got to understand we're not always, which goes back to the leave and cleave, because when you're at home, your parents were making sure you were happy and well fed and all of that stuff, and okay, you're an adult now. and maybe part of that has to do, David and I were older. We were 25 and 26 when we got married. So we weren't teenagers and we weren't right from mom and dad's house. We both lived on our own. And that, I think, really helps you. I maybe would flip Colleen's rule and say live on your own for 2 years, because it's like things go wrong. It's not his problem. It's my problem. I forgot to pay the light bill and the electricity is going to be turned off. Well, that's my problem because I didn't do it. So you have to start taking responsibility for those things so that when you go into a marriage with already known the responsibilities and the pressure it is just to keep yourself going, it's 1 Corinthians 13 will help supplant that, and to where love is a wonderful, wonderful way to suffer with another person. I'm not on my own anymore. It's a wonderful thing.
And Dana, can I interject this?
Sure.
Another reason to live on your own is so you can make all those silly mistakes and nobody's around to see them.
Yes, that's
it's not fair to say, well, wait, why don't we have any lights? Did you not just? It is. It's great. I lived on my own too, and it was fantastic.
It is.
These dumb things, and then it's like nobody has to see it.
Yeah.
And bring it up later.
Less embarrassing.
And I can't blame him for him or anybody else but yourself. And it's like, oh, I better straighten up here.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of 1 Corinthians 13 speaks to, and we read it at weddings, and really it's about the way we interact with anybody. But it is true in marriage too, that we're not self-seeking. We don't keep an account of wrongs suffered. I mean, that is marriage 101, right? Bury the hatchet all the way down.
It's out the door. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't keep a list.
So let's flip this a little bit. What advice do y'all have for having a happy, joyful, wonderful, loving marriage, rather than focusing on how to not fight? Sometimes the problem is just that it's kind of right? It's not that we're fighting, we're roommates. We're not really married anymore. We're just kind of living in the same house, raising the same kids, but there's no joy. There's no enjoyment of one another. How do we keep that joy going throughout the rest of our lives? Dana, you look ready. Let's go.
Always ready for this one. If you both have the love for the Lord in you, and you have a sense of humor. In our house, we don't fight, we tell jokes. And that's a lot of release sometimes when maybe things are getting tense, to, see something funny, say something funny, remember a joke. That breaks a lot of tension. But when you have a sense of humor, not just in jokes, you see that was a crazy thing that just happened. When I went to pay for the gas and the guy in front of me, cut me off, and, just these crazy things that happen, that people, you see road rage, comes up from that. It's just fun to watch it. And that's one thing we tried to teach our children, that especially when we owned our business and our kids worked in the business, and they would see this crazy stuff happening, and they loved it. My daughter especially loved watching the crazy patients and, all of that happened. And, that's out of your control. And if you can see life through that lens, which, going back to 1 Corinthians 13, love is going to cover all of that. And you're so thankful that you're in not that position. You feel sorry for the people who are filled with so much hate and rage that they would come at you for something like that. And I would say, thirdly, just, go to the Song of Solomon. I think in a good marriage, how you don't become roommates is you always stay lovers. I mean, I don't know who our listeners are, but that is so important in a marriage. That is so important. And it should never fail. It takes different, it morphs, because when you're having kids and all of that, it's hard to juggle that. I get that. We live through that, but you work around it and you keep that, so that when you are older and on your own, and yes, things still happen when you're older, and it's sweeter and better, I will tell you that. And it is the glue that keeps your marriage together, because you just absolutely would never think of anybody else, because you're so passionately in love with your husband, your wife, still 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. And that's the way God built us. This isn't a phenomenon. We go back to the Song of Solomon. God built us this way. And that's the way that we are to function. And if you're in a loving, committed, happy, sexually active relationship, then that spills over into everything that you do. That makes you a better brother and sister in Christ. That makes you a better community person. It makes you a better citizen and a better human being.
I love that. That's beautiful. And it takes me to all of the analogies that we see. That marriage is like every relationship. Marriage is instituted by God to teach us something about our relationship with God too.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And the covenant loyalty that we are to have in marriage is reflective of the covenant loyalty that we are supposed to have with God, and that God has with us. And that covenant loyalty says, in my generation's terminology, you're my ride or die. You are like, we're in it for the rest of time.
Right.
This is it. And if this is it, then we've got to figure it out. We don't just throw up our hands and walk away. We're going to figure it out because there is no one else. There is no escape clause.
Yeah.
And so we're going to find what works to make this relationship stick. For sure. Colleen, what about you? What advice do you have for a joyful marriage?
When I give people wedding gifts and I give them a card, a lot of times I'll write on there, if I can't think of anything else to say, I say, remember to laugh together every single day. My husband and I think we've probably laughed together every single day. We just laugh. We're fun. We make each other laugh. It's fun. And so keep it lighthearted. Work to find at least one activity you both really like to do together, and make sure you carve out time to do it. That's been kind of tough for us. Now we go to church together, and he helps me with my Bible classes, and I help him with things. That's one thing. But like a fun like sport or activity, it's hard for us to find something. He does hit me fly balls sometimes.
Oh,
and we do travel some together, but our real interests are kind of really divergent. He likes to fish and things like that. He likes all kinds of scientific things, and I like movies, and I'm a movie buff, and I like sports. But we find a way. Have a real date once a month. And I heard this is a great tip, because when we had little kids, I mean, I was loath to pay a babysitter. And really, yeah. So anyway, I heard this really good idea where you work it out with another couple, and you'd have to be going out kind of late at night. So if you can't do that, this won't work. But the other couple, one of the other couple comes over to your house. You've put your kids to bed, and then that one person they just sit there and they can do whatever they want. They don't have to really watch your kids. Your kids are already in bed. And then you go have your date.
I like that.
I thought it was really good. If you might have to, go, it might have to be a little bit late, but I thought it was a great idea. And then you can trade off, and you don't have to be, if you don't particularly want to watch other people's kids, it is a way of making it pretty easy.
Yeah, we used to do that all the time. We would swap. The kids would spend the night with us, and the other couple would go out for the whole evening. And then the next week they would take our kids. So that was really fun, and that kept us alive.
What did you do, Lauren?
Well, you were talking about different interests. I used to say Matt and I both enjoyed travel, but I used to joke that we would timeshare our travel, because what he enjoyed traveling for and what I enjoyed traveling for were two very different things.
Yeah.
He wanted to be where the people were not, and I wanted to be where the people were. And so we would plan vacations, and we'd spend a day or two out in a national park, and then we'd spend a day or two exploring the big city nearby. And then we'd go spend another day or two out in the middle of the woods doing nothing at all. And then we'd go spend another day or two in a big city. And that way, not only did both of us get what we wanted, but people who didn't know me back then would not have guessed that about me now, because I came to really appreciate and enjoy our times in national parks, to the point where now I'm like, big city, I don't know. That's kind of, and so now I love going to national parks, because we learn to appreciate what the other ones saw in what they enjoyed. And so part of it is being open to being curious, and being open to new experiences, and being open to, okay, well, maybe they're not just automatically wrong about everything. But I think the other big piece of advice that we got was, don't take yourself too seriously. And I've heard that from both of you at various points in this discussion, that it's so easy, especially when you're in the stress of young kids, and if you're both working, or if one of you's homeschooling, or there's a lot of stress, and there's a lot going on, and keeping house is hard, and you've got a lot of demands on your time, and it's really easy for everything to become the super serious, most important thing we've ever thought about doing. And in reality, none of it is. In reality, it's just another day and another thing that you're doing. And if you can learn to joke with each other, if you can learn to find the crazy and the funny and to not take yourselves seriously, that's a really important skill, right? That is a skill set that will serve you in all of your relationships, but especially in your marriage and in that relationship with each other. So one, and I think we'll end with this evening, but one complaint that I've heard about marriage and parenting classes in the Lord's Church is that they are always taught by someone who has their act together, right? We don't pick the troubled marriage husband to teach the Bible class on marriage, understandably. But what that leads to is it's really easy for me to sit back in my seat in the classroom and say, well, of course you know everything about parenting because you have perfect kids and you have the perfect wife and your life is perfect. And what does that have to do with me when my husband and I are fighting every day, or when I feel like I can't handle my kids and I'm losing my identity as a person because I'm pulled in so many different directions? So let's speak just for the last few minutes to the woman who is committed to her marriage and to her husband, but is having a rough go of it. I mean, sometimes you have those spells, even in a great marriage, you're going to have times when life gets rough and when things are hard and you're pulled in different directions. What do we have to say to those ladies who find themselves in a place where they are struggling to get to tomorrow, much less to a joyful 50 or 60 year marriage? What advice do we have to offer to those women, Colleen?
Well, I was close to a marriage. I've been around a marriage of a relative. So it was a situation where I do think that the wife was very committed, and she wasn't asking much of her husband, but it became kind of, with him, it became a kind of lording it over her and just doing what he didn't care what she wanted. He would just do whatever he felt like, even if it was, going back on promises. And none of this was drugs, alcohol, carousing, adultery. It wasn't anything like that. It was just a bunch of stuff just to make you miserable and make you feel like you weren't achieving the things that you wanted to achieve for your children and your family and what you had envisioned. I would say you've got to find a peaceful place to distance yourself if he has not come around yet, and you find yourself in a not a good place, like Lauren's talking about. Find a place, and that is with God. Do your Bible study. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. Carry everything to God in prayer and study. I know that sounds, if that, to many that might sound like schmaltz, but it works. And you've got to carve out at least an hour of your day or a section of your day to have some peace and to not care whether you're not getting what you were asking for, not care that he just changed his mind because he just felt like changing his mind about something you had planned to do. And I would say that one thing that someone told me one time, and I'll just pass this along. I've never been even close to anything like this, but she said she really didn't want a divorce. And they were not faithful Christians, as far as I know, the couple. But she said she really didn't want a divorce. It was just there were lots of problems and she just wanted them fixed. Tried counselor, tried preacher, tried his mother, and no one wanted to get involved. They didn't want to touch it. And so she thought, well, maybe if I talk to a lawyer and see what I can do, maybe some options. And she said, the lawyer said, well, sometimes if you just go ahead and file for divorce, that really straightens them up, and then then that fixes it. And she thought, well, okay, I'll try that. Well, it didn't. He called her bluff. And she said, once that happens, it snowballs, and you can't believe this, but you almost can't stop it. I don't know enough about it, but that's just what she said. So I'll just leave it at that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Divorce can't be on the table. The out can't be on the table if you're gonna make it work. Absolutely. I like that. Dana, what about you? What do you have to offer to women who are struggling tonight?
Well, unfortunately, my husband's family was very broken, and his parents fought all his life. All of his memory was that, and they had a really terrible marriage, so that made him fearful of marriage. And he said that he was convinced that he could be married after being around my family, which was a wonderful compliment. But when we got married, they lived about 3 hours away, and he just laid down the law, and I was like, wow. And he said, when you come into my house, there will be no fighting. Absolutely none. Is that understood? And they both said yes, and he said, because the minute you do, you're out, this is not going to happen.
Wait, he said this to your parents?
No, his parents.
His parents. Oh, okay.
Marriage.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought, well, they'll never show up again. They came every weekend. Every weekend. They drove 3 hours because they were in a safe place. And they knew neither one of them could fight. And it was funny because like 3 months into this with newlyweds coming every weekend, my mother-in-law says, well, when are we going to get a little grandbaby? I said, well, maybe if you stop coming every weekend.
Maybe if you go away.
I think that if people can find a safe place like that, where they know it's a no combat zone, basically, and you can't do in that. I saw that in my own in-laws' marriage and how that their marriage never got to where it should have been, but it certainly got better. And it was so much more civil than it was before and more loving. And it was because David just said, no, you can't. This is the demilitarized zone. You can't. So maybe if people are in, doing this, because I agree with Colleen, you don't go to the divorce lawyer because that's, not something. And you just find somebody who says, okay, in our house, you're welcome to come, but this is not going to happen. Maybe that will help in some way. I don't know, but it sure did for his parents.
I love that. The way that I've seen that suggested is a time frame rather than a place for those boundaries. Mm-hmm. Because when you're in that place where there's some issue that you're struggling over, that's all you see. Yeah, that's all you can see. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen friends who counsel difficult marriages. I've seen them say, okay, take a weekend, 48 hours. We're not talking about that issue at all. We'll talk about other things, but we're going to put a boundary around, we're not going to talk about that issue because you need a break. You need to be able to breathe. And like having the place where arguing doesn't happen. Okay, for this period of time, we're not going to argue about that thing. Yeah. And sorry, go ahead. I heard somebody start to say something.
There's also an old story, maybe you've heard it before, where the marriage counselor says to the couple before divorce, and he told them separately to the husband, you do everything you can, lavish love on her, pull out her chair, take her, open the car door, you just lavish love on her. And then in 30 days, you're going to say, I'm going to have a divorce. And he said the same thing to the woman. You just lavish love on him. And then come back in 30 days and we'll work on your divorce papers. And in 30 days, they came back and they were giggling and holding hands. And he said, well, you're ready for the divorce? Why would I divorce this man? He's the most wonderful man ever. Why would I divorce this woman? So sometimes it takes, and I'm not saying that that's a fix-all for anything. I'm not a licensed professional. I just know from experience what has helped. And maybe it was only
act like you love each other. Just act it, even if you're not feeling it real good.
Yeah. 1 Corinthians 13. Yeah.
Because you do love each other.
That's what
even
started
if some
all
days
this
you don't
mess,
feel it.
Right. David and I would go away for the weekend and leave the kids with my parents. And the first time we would always go to the Napa Valley, which I love, love, love. And the first time David said, "Oh, this is so wonderful, and I just so enjoy being with you." And I went, "Yeah, that's what started all this mess with all these kids."
Exactly.
We have to be
used like
reminded.
each other.
Yes.
Why don't we anymore? Yeah. Well, and in my line of work and personally as well, and Dana, I know you've seen this doing the same work that I do now. I have lived and I have seen a lot of couples dealing with grief and loss, whether it's loss of a child, loss of another loved one, grief of infertility, and those kinds of things will break up marriages in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah.
Because everybody's hurting.
Exactly.
Nobody has anything for anybody.
Exactly. But the best advice that I was given after our daughter died by my cousin, who experienced exactly the same thing, also had a child die at birth. And she came to me and she said, "Lauren, you're going to get a lot of advice. I hope you will hear this piece, even if the rest is worthless. Turn to each other. It is really easy when you're in a situation where you're both hurting,
right,
and you're both unhappy about something. It's so easy to turn to someone else, and not even in a sexual sense at first, at least, but just to get that comfort and that understanding ear and someone who is outside the situation and not also hurting about it.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to turn to someone else, lean on each other. And that's what I tell families now who are going through the roller coaster of adoption, or families who have experienced infertility, experienced child loss, something like that. Turn to each other. Yeah, it's hard. And yeah, you're going to have to be raw and vulnerable, and that's uncomfortable, but it's what God designed this relationship for.
Yeah.
God designed this marriage relationship for you two to support one another throughout whatever difficulties you find. And sometimes one of you is having a difficult time and the other is not. And that's great, because the one who's not hurting can support the one who is much more easily. Sometimes you're both hurting, and you've got to figure out how to turn to each other and support one another, even while you are hurting and bleeding and grieving over whatever has happened. So that, I think that'll be my final piece of advice, is no matter what's going on in your marriage, figure out a way to lean on each other, because that will not make things worse. And turning to someone outside the marriage always will. Every single time without fail. Turning to someone outside the marriage instead of your spouse. That's not to say that you don't sometimes need outside support in the form of a counselor, et cetera, et cetera. But turning to someone else instead of your spouse will not ever make your marriage stronger.
Never.
Not ever.
Never.
It's never going to happen. So I hope that we have been able to bring some hope and some joy and some encouragement into the lives of our listeners tonight when we look at how it is that we can have a joyful, lasting marriage in the Lord, because that's what God wants. That's what God wants for our marriages, is for them to last, but not just to last, but to be joyful in the lasting. That'll come across really well for the people who are listening and not watching the video. There was the face that went with that noise. But I hope we've been an encouragement tonight. And with that, we will say good night to our viewers, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.